Chapter 5 Part 5. Dawn at the new split rock fracture was a monochrome affair. Fog clung to the churned earth and scarred stone, muffling the sound of the restless sea. The air tasted of wet rock and impending rain. Angela stood beside a makeshift tripod disguised as a surveyor's instrument. Hidden within its housing was the EM emitter, a jury-rigged monstrosity of capacitors, wiring, and a focused antenna, all scavenged from cannery machinery and the salty dog's old radio. It hummed with a low, dangerous energy, a wolf in geek's clothing. Anthony stood 10 feet away, exposed on a flat shelf of rock near the fracture's edge. He was the bait, the lighthouse. He wore a simple black sweater, his scarred left arm bare to the cold air. The neoprene sleeve lay discarded. They needed the resonance clear, unfiltered. He looked pale but preternaturally calm, his gaze fixed on the access path. Russo and a hand-picked team of his most capable old-timers were hidden in the rocks above, high-powered rifles trained on the approaches. It was a trap, a bluff, a desperate prayer. A sleek, black electric SUV, silent as a shark, glided out of the fog and stopped 50 yards away. The doors opened. Not black-clad commandos. 2 men in expensive, casual outdoor wear emerged. The driver was muscle, obvious even in a Patagonia vest. The other was Dr. Alistair Vance. He looked exactly as he did in Ben's photos, mid-50s, sharp-featured, with the perpetually tanned skin of someone who conducted fieldwork in luxury resorts. He wore a faint, condescending smile. He didn't approach. Instead, he opened a rear door and gently helped out a slight, terrified-looking woman in her 30s, her hands bound in front of her with a plastic zip tie. She wore a lab coat over hiking pants, her name tag still clipped to the breast pocket. Dr. Lena Reyes, Costa Rica Station. Angela's blood went cold. A hostage. Not a soldier. A scientist. Anthony, Vance called, his voice smooth, carrying easily in the damp air. And Miss Mitchell. A dramatic setting for a negotiation. I must say, your proposal was inventive. He gave the terrified Dr. Reyes a gentle, paternal pat on the shoulder. Dr. Reyes here was kind enough to join us. She was so eager to see the famous split rock fracture, the birthplace of her life's work, in a way. Vance's smile widened. He knew their weakness. They weren't killers. They wouldn't risk an innocent, especially not one of Eleanor's victims. Let her go, Vance. Anthony's voice was flat, cold. The resonance was quiet, a sleeping serpent. This is between us. All in good time, Vance said pleasantly. First, I need assurances. This EM threat of yours. A fascinating application of Benjamin's paranoid theories. But I require a demonstration. A small one. To prove you're not simply bluffing with a souped-up microwave oven. He gestured to the emitter. Activate it. At 10% power. Let's see if the boy flinches. It was a masterstroke. A test they couldn't refuse without revealing the bluff, but one that could genuinely harm Anthony if the emitter worked as theorized. Angela's hand hovered over the hidden trigger switch. Her eyes met Anthony's. His gaze was steady. Do it. She flipped the switch. The emitter hummed, rising in pitch to a faint, almost inaudible whine. Anthony stiffened. A wave of nausea visibly passed over him. He clenched his jaw, his left hand curling into a fist as the scars began to vibrate. Not glow, but the skin around them flushed an angry red. A single drop of blood welled from a healed seam and traced a path down his forearm. Fascinating, Vance murmured, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. The dermal reaction. The vasodilation. Ben's models were more accurate than I credited. He took a step forward, pulling Dr. Reyes with him. Now, the terms. You will deactivate and dismantle that device. You will hand over all copies of Ben's research. And you, Anthony, will come with me, willingly. Dr. Reyes goes free. Harbor's End is left in peace. A more than generous offer, considering. Anthony took a shuddering breath. And if I refuse? Vance's smile didn't falter, but it turned icy. Then I leave Dr. Reyes with you. And I activate the contingency you so cleverly froze. He held up a small, sleek remote. A thermal charge, wired to the liquid nitrogen tank at the cannery. The moment I press this, your solution becomes a steam bomb, aerosolizing the source material and dispersing it over half of Harbor's End. Your mother, Angela, Megan, Russo, they'll become the very catalysts you tried to save. The resonance will burn through the town like a fever. Horror locked Angela's muscles. He'd outmaneuvered them completely. He'd turned their sanctuary into a weapon. Anthony stood perfectly still. The choice was an abomination: surrender and become the key to a global nightmare, or resist and condemn everyone he cared about to a fate worse than death. He looked at Angela, his eyes holding a universe of apology and a terrifying, final resolve. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod towards the emitter. Then he turned back to Vance. "You want a demonstration, Doctor?" Anthony's voice was quiet, but it carried a new, strange resonance, as if the stone itself were amplifying it. "You want to see what happens when the fuse blows?" He didn't wait for an answer. He raised his left arm, the bloodied scars facing the emitter. "Angela."
"Now."
Full power. It wasn't part of the plan. It was suicide. But Angela didn't hesitate. She slammed the override switch to its maximum setting. The emitter didn't whine this time. It screamed. A visible wave of distorted air shot from the antenna, hitting Anthony square in the chest. He didn't just flinch. He was thrown backward as if by a physical blow, landing hard on the rock shelf. His body arched violently, seized by a catastrophic grand mal seizure. White foam mixed with blood flecked his lips. His eyes rolled back into his head. But that wasn't the only reaction. The ground beneath their feet shuddered. Not from the emitter's output, but from something deeper. The new fracture in split rock, the one that had yielded the metal box, began to glow. A deep, angry crimson light, the color of oxidizing iron, pulsed from within the fissure. The same light Anthony's scars had emitted, but magnified 1,000-fold, fueled by the mineral-rich bedrock and the massive EM surge. The resonance wasn't just in Anthony. It was in the stone. Eleanor hadn't just seeded the fracture with source material, she'd saturated the very bedrock with the precursor minerals. The entire cliff face was a dormant battery, and Anthony's overloaded resonance had just short-circuited it. Vance's smug superiority shattered into raw panic.
"No."
"You fool. You'll initiate a cascading mineral reaction. You'll." The fracture erupted, not with fire, but with a geyser of superheated, blood-red steam and pulverized rock. The sound was a deafening, shrieking roar, like the earth itself tearing open. The crimson light intensified, blindingly bright. Vance screamed, dropping the remote and shielding his eyes. His driver turned to run, but a chunk of rock, sheared off by the convulsing earth, struck him down. Dr. Reyes, forgotten, fell to her knees, sobbing. Angela was thrown from the emitter, the device sparking and dying. She crawled towards Anthony, who lay motionless in the midst of the cataclysm, the epicenter of the storm. The red light played over his still form, making him look bathed in blood. Russo and his men, stunned by the geological tantrum, could only watch from the cliffs above as the split rock fracture tore itself apart, the engineered poison in its heart reacting to the sacrificial overload of the boy who had been its key. The bluff had been called. The price had been paid in salt, stone, and a son's ultimate sacrifice. Anthony Moretti had become the EMP, not just for the source, but for the very earth that had been corrupted to create it. He had burned out the root, and himself with it. As the roaring subsided and the crimson light began to fade, leaving behind a steaming, reshaped landscape and a profound, ringing silence, Angela reached Anthony's side. She cradled his head in her lap, her tears cutting tracks through the dust on his still, pale face. The resonance was gone. The static was silent. The only thing that remained was the crushing, absolute quiet after the final, terrible detonation.